appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Because that Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, She is my sister. For fear to say, She is my wife, lest, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. And Abraham called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife. And how saidst thou, She is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, Lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, What is this that thou hast done? One of the people might lightly have lain with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, He that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. We'll go ahead and be seated. In tonight's passage, we're going to turn things around a little bit. On this series on go, and in almost, or in every case so far, it's been God telling someone to go. Rather than it being God telling someone to go tonight, it's instead God telling Isaac not to go. And here is in a nutshell what's happening there. There is famine in the land, which is something we see often in the Bible. It says as we start reading this that it was beside the first famine. There's already been famine before, something that is common. And when that happens, the common thing to do was to go to the big city, to go to Egypt. Obviously, the bigger areas like that would have had more supply. They would have set aside more food, and while costs would be higher, you at least would survive. I was thinking about it as I was studying for this. No one likes to pay more, but when your options are pay more money or die, I don't think there's anyone who would say it's not worth the money. You think famine hits your land, and I'm going to word it this way on purpose. Worldly wisdom says, go to Egypt. And since we don't like that word, you could word it other ways, common sense, or the smart thing to do would be to go to Egypt. They are the power in the world. If anyone has food, it will be them. We see that later on with Joseph. When famine hits the land, Joseph had years previously been led of God to put food aside so that the rest of the people, or so that the countries around sent people to Egypt to buy food. It's how Joseph gets reunited with his brothers there in Egypt buying food. In this case, again, that's what worldly wisdom would have said to do. What someone smart would have done. It's what common sense would have said, is go to Egypt. It's one of those things, if you had a lick of sense, when famine hit your land, you're going to head for Egypt. However, in Isaac's case, there's a problem with that. God says, don't go to Egypt. And here's what I find interesting about that, because what God says goes against what common sense would have said. Common sense would have said, go there. There's food there. There's provision there. And God says, don't go. I have you here for a reason. I don't want you to go to Egypt. I want you here. And very often, God does that in our lives as well. Something that is common sense, or seems like common sense to us, and God says, don't do it. Few examples. Job offers. Between growing up in a pastor's home and now being the assistant pastor here for 7+ years, you have no idea how many times I've heard people say they got some job offer, but it means they have to move, and the pay is better, and the benefits are better, and the area seems nicer. And in their mind, common sense says, this is something I can't pass up. It's an opportunity I have to take. And I always feel like I have to be the mean guy and say, what about the church in town? And I'll just be blunt here tonight, that if there isn't a good church in town, then that's God saying, go not. goes against common sense. It goes against what we think is right, but it's a mistake. A few years back, I had a friend who did this. He had a great job offer, better pay, better benefits. This was his whole selling point on it. Better pay, better benefits, a house provided. Everything looked great. And he would have even admitted this before going, but church. He told me that. Well, yeah, there's not one, but not one close, but we'll find something. And at the time, he was sure this was the best thing. And I just talked to him recently, and he told me very plainly this was a mistake. At this point, they've lived there 5 years or more and still not been able to find a good church. But what he told me, he said, my family is now used to this pay and this place, and I don't think I can go back. God was telling him, go not, but he went with common sense. Sometimes it's a job offer. Sometimes it's things like family. People will come and say, well, my family lives in this area, and we just feel like we need to move back. It's common sense, but just because it's common sense doesn't mean it's right. I've seen a lot of families ruined because of moving closer to family. Sometimes it's out of necessity or quote necessity. A person feels like they have to do this, trying to move away from something or maybe trying to move to something, and it seems like that this is the thing they have to do. But often the thing that we think we have to do is not where God's leading. Again, look at Isaac. It's a famine in the land. There's no food. He has a family to think about. He has a family to think about. He can't be reckless and follow God. He can't stay in a place where there's no food and just down in Egypt there is food. I mean common sense would say this is a move you have to make. But God tells Isaac don't. And in fact gets even more specific than don't go to Egypt, and tells him you're going to sojourn in this land. I said last week that God has a specific place for each person. He has last week I said He has you here on purpose, and that's what He's saying to Isaac. I have you where you are on purpose. I have a plan for you right where you are. Trust that I can care for you. And you would think that Isaac has seen God do that. He would understand trusting God. I mean, you think about it, this is the boy who was on the altar ready to be sacrificed by his dad. When God stepped in and provided the lamb, he's seen firsthand how God can provide. He's seen with his own eyes, with his own life, how God can take care of him. But then in this case, he doesn't trust God. And I can see someone think, come on, Isaac. You've seen it yourself. Why wouldn't you trust God? And I know that was kind of the first thought that I had with it. But then before we get too quick to judge, let's look at ourselves, because how many times has God provided for us? How many times has God come through in our lives and provided for us in a way that only God could do? And then the very next time a trial comes or some problem arises, we panic again. As soon as something comes up, we forget about the times that God's taken care of us, and we forget about how many times He's provided, and we go right back to what common sense would say, rather than trusting Him. I drive people crazy with this. I've had multiple people tell me this, because it's just my personality. I don't worry about things. I'm really not a worrier. Not trying to say anything good about myself. It's the personality God gave me. So someone will come up or something will come up, and I'll go to someone and ask them to pray about it. And often I get the response, well, what are you going to do? I don't know, but here is why I can do that, because somehow I've figured out God's taken care of me over and over and over. Why would He stop now? But Isaac here reverts to common sense. And Isaac doesn't directly disobey God, but he also doesn't directly obey Him. Isaac did not go down into Egypt. He didn't go into Egypt. Instead, he went to Gerar. Verse 6, it makes it very, very clear. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And I did some research this week. I wanted to make sure I was right on this. And if I can read a map right, what Isaac did, rather than going into Egypt and directly disobeying God, he went to the border.
Yeah.
Gerar is not in Egypt. It's just right outside of Egypt. He didn't disobey. He didn't go into Egypt, but he also didn't stay where God had told him to be. I read a commentary this week that put it this way, that Isaac came up with a backup plan. That he didn't disobey God and go into Egypt. He didn't directly disobey God. He just got close enough that if things went bad and God didn't deliver, he could get there in a hurry. That's how this guy worded. I thought it was well put, that he didn't go directly against what God said. He just got himself close enough that if God didn't handle it, then he could go with common sense. He planned things out in a way that if God doesn't come through for me in time, then I can go back to what common sense would say, what worldly wisdom would say, and I can save my family. Which again is something we can't look down too much on Isaac for, because we often do the same. We quote, trust God, but we have our contingency plan, our backup plan, just in case God doesn't deliver. We put together kind of our plan of how we can come out of it. Now, it's in all of this that we find our passage today that I have just 2 points tonight that I want to kind of point out very simply. I'll give them to you right off the start, and then I'll get into them. The first is what happens when you obey, and what happens when you don't. This passage starts off with God explaining if he obeys, what will happen. So number one, what happens when you obey? Look at verses 3 and 4 again. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father, and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and I will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed. This is before any of this happened, and God makes it clear. The famine has started, but God makes it clear to Isaac, stay where you are, and if you'll stay, as I've told you, or where I've told you, here's what I'll do. I will, first of all, be with you. Now, there's a couple of parts to that. You have to think many were leaving. Remember, common sense, worldly wisdom, go to Egypt. I guarantee that when this famine hit, many of Isaac's neighbors, many of Isaac's friends, many of the people that Isaac would have known packed up and headed to Egypt. Many of his friends would have said, well, this is the thing that you have to do. If you want to take care of your family, if you want to take care of your flocks and your livestock, you have to travel where there's food. God saying that I will be with thee means he won't be there all by himself. He won't be alone. Which is big, because no one likes to be alone. Everyone likes companionship, someone with you, especially when going through something difficult, like a famine. When going through some sort of struggle or problem in life, no one likes to be alone. They want someone to help. Even if it's a situation where no one really can help, they want someone there to help. If for nothing else, for that moral support. This was going to be something difficult. Waiting out a famine isn't going to be easy. This was going to be hard. Having someone with you was big, but more than just having someone there, his companionship was going to be from God. This is better than just having some friend there. This is more than just having, some neighbors around you. This is having the Creator with you. This is having the one who makes the rainfall with you. This is a famine. This is having the one who makes the crops to grow with you. It says, if you stay, I'll be with you. If you stay, second of all, I'll bless you. Look at verse 3. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee and will bless thee. And he goes into specifics of how he's going to bless. And he promises blessings in 3 ways. First of all, he tells them, I'll bless you with countries. Everyone else is leaving. They're all abandoning the country. There's no food, there's no water, no provisions for family, flocks, and all that, and they're out of there. So if you stay, all that was theirs is yours. They're leaving it all behind, so to the one who stays, it all goes. Which the promise of countries would have been a special promise to Isaac, being that his dad was the one who God told, just start walking and I'll tell you when you're there. He mentions that in verse 3, that he's giving him countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. This was a promise given to his dad, and now God's saying to his son, you're there. If you'll stay, it's all yours. Promises to bless with countries. Promises to bless with family. Again, verses 3 and 4, we're not going to read them right now, but he talks about that he'll bless his seed. He talks he's going to multiply his seed. Again, a special promise to Isaac because of the promise to his dad, that he'd be a great nation. God is telling him, if you stay where I want you, that'll start with you. I'll bless you with children. But in a roundabout way, both of these blessings point to one more way he's going to bless. And I'm going to just word it this way, a blessing of survival. Now this is just simple thought process here, but having countries does you no good whatsoever if you're dead. If you've starved to death. I don't care how much land a person has. I could own the entire United States. If I'm dead, what good does it do me? Having a family is a little difficult if you're dead. I mean, pretty basic here, but a corpse can't have kids. So in promising to bless him in these other two ways, he's saying, oh, and by the way, you'll make it through this. You'll survive. God tells Isaac, if you'll stay where I want you, I'll be with you and I'll bless you. And here's what I find so great about this. The same is true for us. If we stay where God has us, if we figure out that this is the place God wants me and determine that I'm going to stay just right here, just like he promises Isaac, God will be with you. He won't leave you alone. You may feel alone sometimes, but he'll always be right beside you. The creator of everything will be beside you, and he'll bless. Maybe not in the same exact ways that he promises blessings to Isaac, because not every person needs the same thing, but he'll bless and provide. God says, if you stay where I put you, I'll be with you and bless you. But as I said at the start, there's 2 points. What happens when you obey? And that we see promises from God. But the second part is what happens when you don't. And we get that example from what Isaac decides to do. Look at verses 6 through 11. Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, she is my sister, for he feared to say, she is my wife, lest, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife, and Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety she is thy wife, and how saidst thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, because I said, lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, what is this thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have lain with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Isaac, because he decides not to stay where God wants him, because God says go not, and he goes anyways, he makes a stupid mistake. He falls into sin, if you will. He goes into Gerar, and right off the bat we see him fearing his life, that the men of the area will kill him for his wife. So he does what any manly man would do, and he tells his wife, pretend you're my sister so they won't kill me. Real tough guy stuff right here. Which would have worked out fine, except a man acts differently toward his wife than he does his sister. I mean, I don't have sisters, but I have sister-in-laws, and I love my sister-in-laws and get along really well with them, but I treat my wife different than I treat my sister-in-laws. All of it was working out until the king noticed and decided either he's lying or there's something really weird about this situation. He made a stupid mistake. And I don't think there's any way to say calling your wife your sister so people won't kill you is anything but a stupid mistake. The problem is the same happens with us. When God says don't go and we go anyways, it always leads to a stupid mistake. It always leads to us falling into sin, falling away from God. Second part, Isaac then is driven out of the country. If you look down at verse 16 and 17, it says, and Abimelech, this is after that, and Abimelech said unto Isaac, go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. And Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. He's not wanted. He's put himself and his family and his servants and everything that he has in an awkward position because he's disobeyed God. And I'll just say this now, when you leave God's will for your life, it does that. It affects more than just your life. This affected a whole lot more than just Isaac. It hurts more than just you. So often, that's how we look at it, that I made this mistake and I'll reap the consequences. And there are consequences that we will face. But more often than not, the ones who are hurt the most is not the one who made the mistake. It's often that person's family. Isaac's kids had no say in going to Gerar, but they were cast out with Isaac. Isaac's servants had no say in staying where they were, but they received exactly the same consequences. It affected everyone. When Isaac disobeyed, he made a stupid mistake. He was driven out of the country, and then he was added strife. Look at verse 18. It says, and Isaac digged again. This is just when they've come into the valley of Gerar. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. And he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. And Isaac's servants digged in the valley and found there a well of springing water. And the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's servants, saying, the water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. And they digged another well and strove for that also. And he called the name of it Sitnah. And goes on from there. He has been, at this point, kicked out of Gerar, goes back to where he should have been the entire time. This is where God had told him to stay. This is the land he was in before, and we can see that pretty clearly because it's the wells his father had dug. But while he's gone now, the herdsmen of the area claimed the area. And now there was strife that wouldn't have been there had he just stayed when God told him to. And Isaac and his servants have to face extra strife and problems because they hadn't obeyed God. At this point, again, he's back where he belongs. But he's having to clean up the mess. I'm going to clean up the mess he made. And the same is true for us. We disobey what God wants, and it always causes a mess to clean up. It always causes unnecessary strife, even when we try to return to where he wants. It causes unnecessary strife, cleaning up the mess because we didn't listen. So what's the point of this message? Here it is. Sometimes, and actually I'm even going to change that to oftentimes, God tells us to do something or not to do something, as in Isaac's case, that defies common sense. Something he wants us to do, or again, to not do, that goes against everything that we think we know. But regardless of common sense, if we'll obey his will and his way, he'll be with us and he'll bless. But if we don't, if we decide we need to follow our wisdom, make up our own way, it always leads to a mess. It always leads to sin, feeling out of place, and unnecessary strife. So this evening, the conclusion that I see from Isaac is very, very simple, but difficult. And it's this: defy worldly wisdom and follow God's. The concept is very, very simple: to follow Christ, not the world. But often that proves difficult to do. To turn from what we seem to think is right. Here's the idea tonight. With God's help, let's determine to follow God's way. To set aside what we think is right, to set aside what common sense, what worldly wisdom would say is right, and simply decide, I'm going to follow